So I'm with Bianca van Wyk and Jimmy Ramokgopa from the Alliance of Social Democrats. I'd like to find out a little bit more about the Alliance of Social Democrats. So, Jimmy, could you summarize briefly what is ASD?
Okay, well, just to give like a brief description, the best way to describe us is to describe us as a think tank. We are advocates of social democracy, though. So in our think tank spaces, we decimate and we talk about ideas that are related to social democracy, and we push for social democracy within the political atmosphere. We are not a political party, as we have described in on our website and on our social media pages. However, we push for social democracy to become an idea that is recognized not only by political activists, but those who participate politically and particularly within the policy-making spheres of our country. So that's like how can I put it, the nutshell definition of what we are.
So then, Jimmy, the devil's obviously in the details. What is your definition of social democracy?
Well, the best definition is to describe it based on the principles. The three principles that guide social democracy is freedom, equality, and solidarity. So a social democrat would be pro policies that include the three principles. So if it's an economic policy that's being put forward by members of parliament, then the social democrat will support policies that first of all is of the best interest of the economy, but also of the best interest of the people, particularly those who are marginalized and those who often are left for last when it comes to being beneficiaries of government programs. So as long as people first and foremost understand the three principles, then it becomes easier for people to then identify themselves as social democrats, but also be able to talk about social democracy more clearly with family and friends.
Okay, well, Jimmy, I'm going to circle back to some of the things that you said, but Bianca, I'd like to come to you. How did this come about?
Okay, so it was a group of us, and I think what actually, even though we're not a political party, I can probably we must also say that politics did have a impact on our decision to start this because of the binary thinking. You either, left or right, and there's the one lot fighting the other, and there's no middle ground. And I think what happened is we found each other on Twitter, strangely enough, people that are principled, that have got certain, I would say, are not really politically minded, but that are active in that sphere, and started noticing that, yes, there's all this rhetoric and people are splitting off to the one side or the other, and there's no solution-focused approach. And I think that was our main issue, is looking at things based on principle. And again, back to what Jimmy said, based on freedom, equality, and solidarity.
Okay, well, you talk about the polls in South Africa. What, in your definition, in your view, what are those two extreme poles that you would like to put the ASD in the middle of?
Okay, so I wouldn't say that we are going to put the ASD in the middle of those poles, but we are looking at solutions. But if I had to look at it, you've got what you would call your socialists on your left, and then on your right you've got your capitalists. Okay, people that are very focused on it's your market of ideas and things like that, and free markets. And we want to, and that's another thing, is we don't want to say that either are bad, because there's good ideas from both sides. It's just no one's talking to anyone. And that was where we came in.
Okay. So I'm trying to sort of, I think that it's difficult to sort of place any political party on a binary between the left and the right, or any political organization. I think that's very simple, simple-minded. But Jimmy, I'd like to come back to you now. What are the goals, since you're not contesting electoral power? What are the goals of ASD? What are the desired outcomes, and how are you looking to achieve that?
Yeah, so we know from observation that well, even throughout history, we know that discourse does influence in one way or the other the political outcomes of countries. You know, the discourse that's happening throughout Africa usually is that of socialism and that of communism. And we see that also being translated and finding its way into policymakers and finding its way into politicians, because politicians usually go for the populist route. And the populist route is usually what the majority of people are thinking and what the majority of people are saying, or what the perception of a good idea is. So we can't be bystanders and allow bad ideas to flourish within a country, because if bad ideas flourish, it means that the chances of those bad ideas becoming actual practice from a policy perspective is much higher. And so the best thing that one can do, which is an effective thing, is to actually dilute the so-called bad ideas, and to put into, or rather onto the table, ideas that are an alternative and that people can actually resonate with and promote. You know, so when you have control of the discourse, and you have a bit of an influence on the discourse, you do play a critical role in the overall mechanics of policy making, and in the overall mechanics ultimately of what ends up being law and what ends up being the rule of the day when it concerns to a particular country. So discourse is one thing, but strategic discourse is another. So it's all good for people to talk, but if people aren't talking strategically, then not much can happen. So that is why we formalized ourselves, and that is why we organizing ourselves. And when you organize yourselves as people, then you start having strategic conversations. And by having strategic conversations, you catch the eye of, as you have mentioned, media houses. You catch the eye of people around. They start talking about you, and the next thing you know, people are starting to talk about the ideas that you are setting out through your think tanks, through your discussions, through your infographics, through giving people information about where these systems work and how they work. You know, so everything has a role, everything has a place. Not everything happens at the end where the politicians sit, but everything is layered, and it's about finding your part to play, and finding your space to contribute, and being good at that particular space, which ultimately contributes to the whole mechanics of what's actually happening from a political perspective.
So, Jimmy, you say that there are populist ideas which are harmful. Can you give me one example of an idea that the ASD has that differentiates itself from populist ideas that are in the body politic at the moment?
So we have to understand it in context. You see, so the ideas that for Africa may be suitable for Africa, but not necessarily suitable for other countries, based on the historic context of Africa. So when we talk about Africa, we talk a lot about redress, right? So, and it's a common conversation throughout any country within the African continent that has been colonized before. So that's the conversation that we have, and everyone can agree that we need some form of redress. But if the conversation is not made strategically, then people often think that redress automatically means state ownership and state control of everything, because they believe that the state can then handle everything and thus trust the state to be able to manage whatever resources are out there. So that's the typical route, you know. As we are seeing right now in our country, we are also almost tending towards that. You have political parties that come out, and oh, sure, their messaging, their underlying messages, for example, like the EFF, their underlying messages are true and they're correct. We need to redress. We need to solve past injustices. But the solutions that they go for are solutions that have proven to not be effective for Africa. You know, so what we are saying is that, look, Africa has a lot of problems. We have political problems, and the political problem and is what we are facing right now from the sense of trying to decolonize and trying to redress and so on and so forth. But it also has an economic problem, and the economic problem is the issue of production. Are we producing enough? Are we putting enough people at work? So to solve the economic problem, we might need to look at ideas from the capitalists or the liberals, you see. And then to solve the political problems, we might need to look at the ideas from the socialists. And as Bianca mentioned, both have some solutions for each type of problem that we are facing. We just need to pick out from each and get each to start talking to each other so that we have a solution that actually works for South Africa.
Jimmy, I want to come back to some of those points that you've mentioned about pragmatism. But Bianca, I want to come back to you because we had a discussion a few weeks ago about similarities. That I put it to you that there's similarities between the ASD and the Democratic Alliance circa 1999 under when Lindiwe Mazibuko was the parliamentary leader. They had very much a similar approach to pragmatic middle road between socialism and protection of the markets. Since then, in my view, or as we talked about, the body politic that has been stretched between the DA since pivoted quite far right, as you may not be aware, from your Twitter mentions. And then also far left, you've seen basically populism taking place in terms of the EFF gaining attraction in the body politic. Is it not a case of ASD simply reoccupying the middle ground that has been left abandoned by liberal elements in the DA and liberal elements in the ANC?
I think it would be better, I would say, that ASD would occupy the social democratic space. And there was, not so long ago, as you've just mentioned, there was actually space for that in the DA. And there is, my understanding from what I see from policy, is there is space for that in the ANC. So I wouldn't say, again, I must highlight, as a civic organization, we don't play that a political role. So, but what we will be doing is playing an active role, as Jimmy said, in actually influencing policy, having discussions, making sure that citizens are active in contributing, but along the social democratic space. The people that we've connected to and that follow us they believe in the principles and the values that are aligned to social democracy. So I wouldn't say that we're occupying the political space, but we're actually making space for social democrats. I think that would be it. And that could be, again, I must highlight, there are certain policies in both parties, in a number of parties, I mean, that you can take pieces from. There's lots of bad ideas. Okay, there's lots of bad ideas. But I believe that we mustn't throw the baby out with the bathwater.
Yes.
That's the important thing.
Yes. Jimmy, I want to come back to you. The previous input, you made an allusion to land redistribution. So I'd like to ask you in a quick fire way, what are your policies on land redistribution? What are your policies on or thoughts about the labor market? What are your thoughts about issues of even a universal basic income? Some of those things that have characterized social democratic movements around the world. What is the view of ASD on these issues?
I'm sure Bianca also will add a bit on land.
Yes, whoever
but
wants
just
to jump in can jump in.
Would you like to jump in, Bianca, on the land issue? I know you've done quite a bit of work there.
Okay, so on the land issue, for us, again, from ASD, we do believe, because we recognize that what has happened in the past, we recognize that there needs to be change. People were displaced. We also recognize the value, the economic value of actually owning land, and how that gives a springboard to individuals and creates generational wealth. And if you want to close the equality gap, which I must also highlight, it's going to be, it's work. You know, I know a lot of people say you'll never do it, but why can't we try? Okay, at least put our efforts into it. And so we are pro land reform. But more, I would say, more importantly, we would like to educate people on actually what's happening in that space, because I've noticed a lot of people have got totally the wrong idea. I'm not speaking for ASD now, but in general, I am still struggling with the idea of state custodianship. And we are actually going to open space for people that are actually educated in the area and have participated in the process to actually educate us as citizens on the issue of land reform. But as I said, we're pro.
Okay.
Yeah.
And Jimmy, the issue of UBI.
Yeah. Yeah. Look. For us, in terms of UBI, we are pro those type of policies. Again. But what I need to emphasize is that the policies need to be appropriate for South Africa. If it makes sense for people to get a UBI of 10,000 Rand a month, for example, that would be great if it's possible for South Africa's context. But if South Africa's context requires us to first work on building up the economy and then supplementing that with some form of welfare. It might not necessarily be a UBI, but it might be welfare that's a little bit more decent. Then maybe not give people 410 bucks a month. Maybe give them more. You know. So that's our standing. You know. But again, it has to be appropriate for our context, and it has to make sense. There's no point in giving people the same amount of money that a European country does, but then with such a low tax base, which would ultimately lead us to debt in a Venezuela type of situation, you know. So that's what we're trying to avoid. We do believe in state welfare, however, it has to be appropriate. You know, that's what makes us different from a socialist. And that's the difference, because, as I said, we have three principles, which is freedom, equality, and solidarity. So the freedom aspect is particularly with regards to the economy, the freedom for the economy to thrive and to grow as much as possible. Whereas the socialist would only consider equality and solidarity. You see what I mean? So yeah, that's the best way I can answer your question right now, is that yes, in principle, we do support things like UBI, but also they need to make sense for our current situation right now as a country.
Okay. Well, I want to get around to asking about the general state of politics in South Africa. But before I get off the topic of the ASD, how does one join the ASD? What are its structures? You say it's a think tank. How does one find you? How do you support the ASD? And is it possible for somebody to be in another political party and still contribute to the ASD?
Yeah, absolutely. We have one of our founding members is a member of a political party. We don't discriminate on the basis of political lines. As I said, the main idea is to drive ideas of social democracy. In fact, it'd be great to have people from other political parties, because they can then go back to their political parties in their branches, in their policy meetings, and they can then advocate for social democratic policies. You see what I mean? So
Yes.
so that's our role, you know. So our role is on the root basis, where we fill people with ideas, and we hope that those ideas they can take forward to the political parties that they're active in, or whatever work that they're active in, and promote such policies with the idea of promoting social democracy within our country.
Cool. So,
And in terms of getting in contact with us, we are establishing a membership portal, so people will be informed about that, and we will have members on board and start spreading our messages to much broader spaces.
good. So on to more general topics, Bianca, and then Jimmy, I also want you to jump in to give your insight. What the hell just happened in our political system, and how the hell do we get out of it?
It's so confusing. It's going to be very difficult to actually get out of where we are now. And when you say what the hell, can I ask you a question?
Yes.
What specifically are you referring to? Because there's so much going on at the moment.
Yeah. Well, I'm referring to what people termed as the Zuma coup initially. And now I see News 24 are hashtagging it as Unrest South Africa. So in the lead up to the Zuma having to be arrested, and then the subsequent looting and all that stuff, it's I just want to get your take on what's happening in more than the 140 character burst that I see your takes on it on a daily basis. So yeah. Yes.
Okay, so I think first of all, it was an attempted coup. It failed. Okay,
I agree.
Is my understanding. And I think for me, besides which also highlights that there is certain issues that will need to be dealt with within our governing party when it comes to factions, if this is going to happen. But I haven't got much insight into that. But what I wanted for me is the issue of, yes, that there was the attempted coup. For me, the problem was that we were such a hotbed for it.
Yes.
But it actually happened. You know, that for me, that's what we need to be focusing our energy on, is we don't want to, okay, so all the fires have been put out, but they're smoldering. And there is no guarantee that this will not happen again. And how do we make sure that this doesn't happen again. And there, I think we need to dig a little bit deeper than, politics. It's not just but how did this happen and so fast? So for me, that's where we need to be asking the questions. And I see everyone's now worried about returning looting goods and things like that. And we'll eventually get over it. But then there's no guarantee that we haven't still got that smoldering underneath that we haven't addressed. So that's how I feel about that particular, last week.
Yeah. Jimmy, your views?
No, absolutely. I agree 100% with Bianca. Yes, it was a political stunt that was being pulled. However, it had almost the perfect conditions to thrive. In a sense that it had a lot of people who were unemployed, a lot of people who were hungry and desperate, and so which made it easier for them to do whatever it is that they were trying to do. So yeah, so that's just I think it's just a wake up call for state security, especially intelligence. Because a lot of the things that happened, we saw them before they escalated. If people on the ground could see them before they escalated, it just says a lot about our security services. So I hope that lessons have been learned, and particularly our security services will be a little bit more alert next time, and we're not going to face the same scale of damage and issues that we have seen over the last week.
Cool. Yeah, I agree with you guys both about first of all, that the seeds were there. It was ripe for a situation like that. And secondly, about the security services. I think I'm on record with Bianca to say, this is exactly what's going to happen. And that's exactly what happened. So you're right, Jimmy, when you say that everybody could see it coming. So why couldn't the security services? I've got two more questions generally to ask you about. The first one is about COVID and the government's response to COVID. What do you think the differences should have been in the rollout of COVID, and how do we reach out to anti-vaxxers and the growing sort of fundamentalist anti-vaxxers in South Africa?
Okay.
Okay. Anyone can take
okay.
Yeah.
Okay. In my opinion, I think that we had a lot of missed opportunities. Missed opportunities came due to corruption. I think we should have had a lot more vaccines available. And we should have probably by now opened it up to the 20-somethings for them to get vaccinated. So a lot of missed opportunities due to corruption. Instead of people spending millions on PPE that never reached people, and millions on fumigating empty classrooms in Gauteng, then perhaps we could have managed to get a lot more people. Because what we saw immediately when the 35-year-olds were released, or rather were eligible to get vaccinated, in a day, about 1 million of them registered on the government website. So it just shows that, sure, the older people are a bit reluctant because they come from a generation where vaccines sometimes killed them. But the younger generation now understand that, we've moved quite far from a medical point of view, and the risks have become far less. And I think, sure, the older generation might be struggling, but South Africa is a youthful country. We have more young people than older people. So if we vaccinate all the 30-somethings and all the 20-somethings, we will be in a good position nonetheless. So I think it's just unfortunate that the vaccines didn't come in time. Otherwise, we would have opened up to younger people quicker, and we would have most likely vaccinated quite a huge portion of the population by now.
and Bianca.
Okay, and
I'd like to. Yes,
I'll take.
I'd like.
Okay, I think I'll take this section on anti-vaxxers.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. So we spend a huge amount of time trying to convince people that have made up their mind based on Facebook and YouTube videos that they are not going for a vaccine. And for me, what we're doing at the moment is I find it kind of counterproductive because you get involved in a lot of these arguments with individuals. What I have seen people have started doing is actually sharing information and not, just keep on flooding your social media and in conversations with pro-vaccine information. Instead of getting to the one person that's watched 20 YouTube videos on how not to vaccinate, why they mustn't, because they're going to, something's going to happen. They're going to grow horns or whatever. So my focus, and I generally have this opinion on a lot of things, is provide the information, provide the ideas, drown out the voices, drown out those voices that are, and that's what we do, because they're busy. It's actually a strategy that's often used if we look at America, it's used by Republicans, is they flood you with information continuously. Yeah. And we've got to start realizing that that's the way to go. Instead of wasting time addressing one individual that's decided they're not going to take the vaccine.
Yeah.
Okay.
I agree with you. Guys, I'd like to thank you for availing yourselves for this today. I've been wanting to, I was very curious about this project for a long, long time, as you know. And then now that it's come to fruition, it's very heartening to see what you guys have done. So congratulations on that. And I hope to hear and see more of you guys in the future. There's so much left that I would like to talk to you about. But we'll do that on another session.
Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Cool, no
Thank
problem.
you.